As you might be able to see, I still don't have a couch. Today, I'm going to be talking about Beautiful World, Where Are You by Sally Rooney. My name's Eleni. Welcome to Writer Reader. The reason you don't see me holding up books is because I use this Kindle. This is not the latest model of Kindle, but I love it because it looks like an actual page. In fact, I was reading in the subway while I was standing up and she's like, oh my God, I love this. It looks just like a book. It doesn't have that backlight, so it's very fun to read. But yeah, most of my books I download here either from the library or I buy them. That's why I'm not holding a book when I'm talking about them. I'm sure you had that question on your mind. Speaking of books, this week I was introduced by a writing friend to a book cafe in the neighborhood of Califea, which is a few subway stops away. It was beautiful. It reminds me of the cafes we find in the States. It's very cozy. I'll be back. So how I found this book, it was published in 2021, and I found it kind of in an odd way. I think it was George Saunders who was giving an example of someone who wrote without quotations well. Since I was experimenting with that myself, I decided to read one of her books for that reason. We don't always come to books for deep, profound reasons. It does make you pay a little more attention as a reader. The book follows a friendship between the protagonists Alice and Eileen as they enter their 30s and navigate both their careers and relationships. I would say a lot of the book consists of email exchanges between the two of them, which reminds me, let me tell you, back in the 90s when I worked for the armored car company, I used to leave during lunch and go to a park, and one of the ideas, had a lot of ideas at the park, was to write a book consisting of emails only. And this was an infancy of emails. After reading this book, I'm glad I didn't do that. Sally Rooney is a best-selling and critically acclaimed author. She's been called the first great millennial novelist, the Salinger for the Snapchat generation. To give you an idea, Vox has an article that I'll link below called The Cult of Sally Rooney. And in it they say, if you read Sally Rooney, the thinking seems to go, you're smart, but you're also fun. And you're also cool enough to be suspicious of both smart and fun as general concepts. Alice, one of the main protagonists, she's a famous writer and sort of reluctantly so. She wasn't aware of all the things that fame would bring, which is very similar to the writer. Sally Rooney is Irish, and she was actually born the year after Remains of the Day, my first video I covered, was published, so 1991, so a very young author. In college, she was a competitive debater, which makes sense given sort of the tone of this book and the structure of it, the two friends debating different world events, political and philosophical ideas. Her debut was published in 2017, and that was Conversations with Friends. And that was followed quickly by Normal People, which you might have heard of because it also is a Hulu and BBC TV series. I want to live in a culture where people are making art, even as everything else falls apart. It gives my life meaning. So true, and that is why I love Zorba the Greek, this idea of dancing, even as you are surrounded by suffering, to continue living and creating art, basically. So how she wrote this book. She said her first two books just kind of poured out of her. She actually had to research, she said, despite the success of the other two, how to write a book. So she says, I wasn't thinking, what is a voice? What is a protagonist? It was so natural. All those questions just answered themselves as I wrote. But this time, for writing Beautiful People, Where Are You? She says, it was like I'd never done it before. It was with this book that I sat down and thought, wait a minute, what is a novel? I seem to be writing them. But what are they? I love that. So to figure it out, she read and researched, and reportedly her colleagues said she would go into the office, close the door, and close all the blinds and just stay in there longer than anybody else. I think that this book would pair well with this food.
I don't like to diss other people's products, but I do think it actually hurts animals to put out bad products. They're made by Green V, which I love their little logo with the bicycle. Love it, but it tastes like total crap. Or there's companies that make vegan deliciousness that are delicious. They need to crack that code and figure it out before they put out their own crap.
Now you will probably know what my impressions might be, but Let's start with the positive. She is an excellent writer. Do I need to say that? So many other people have concluded this already. Doesn't always mean that that's true though. 4 stars for her writing. I said that on my Goodreads review. I stand behind it. It does not trouble me at all not to have the quotations. And I was interested in that, I think, because I am also wanting to write in a non-interrupted way. The flow of conversation becoming part of the landscape of the book, both the inner mind and the outer kind of combining. And unlike other reviewers, at least on Goodreads, I did enjoy the detail that she gave. It made me feel the way she would describe things that I was there. I would even stop reading just to marvel how realistically she would depict something. I could envision the scenes. Speaking of very well-written sex scenes, and this might be controversial, maybe it's not, but I think women writers tend to write better sex scenes. Debate me. Actually, I'm a terrible debater. I have some trauma from 10th grade. I also liked how she wrote about social media. She didn't name the apps, which is great because then technically your book is a little bit longer lasting. Here's where I struggled. The 2 protagonists, Alice and Eileen, they were indistinguishable. Their emails to each other, if you didn't know whose chapter it was, I feel like I wouldn't have known who they were. So it felt like just one person kind of having a conversation with themselves. Even if this is one character, like not 2 characters, that one character that this was, I didn't get a good sense of who that was. Same with Simon. Simon seemed like a lobotomized zombie, placed into the story as a focus for Eileen. I contrast this with a character that a lot of people in the reviews on Goodreads at least said that they disliked, Felix. I thought he was the best character. Yes, he's unlikable oftentimes, but he was also very likable because he would actually be honest and straightforward and direct, which was kind of a relief. And that leads to the question, are we supposed to like characters in books or be intrigued by them or something else? By the last, I would say 20% of the book, I just did not care about these characters anymore, and I was really ready for it to be finished. The emails, though they were interesting philosophical explorations, also felt like a forced way to talk about the issues. So kind of like if I wanted to talk to you about animal rights, for instance, and I just kind of had a dialogue about that, but just with me, rather than organically melding with the novel. But the quality of her writing and her ideas makes me want to read more. So I did download Conversations with Friends, which was available. A friend told me actually that I have to see Normal People and that it's brilliant. So I'm looking forward to watching that. Some critiquers of the critics have said, well, you just don't, you might not understand, not to me, but just in general, you might not understand, you're not of that generation, like I'm Gen X, right? And I feel like that's not a fair critique because we often read about people who are not our age. If we only read our age, it would be very difficult and there would be no classics. Shakespeare's still good, even though it was a long time ago. Good literary fiction is lasting, and so it doesn't matter that these people are in their 30s if it's engaging and good. But this book and reading about Sally Rooney also made me think a lot about the culture of fame and hype. So this book did get a lot of good reviews, and certainly I'm sure people enjoyed it. But if she weren't already so famous for those other books, I wonder if the same sort of rave reviews would have happened. Did you read this book or any of her books? Have you seen Normal People? What did you think? Now is the time where we need to put the protagonist on the therapist's couch.
Well, in 1995, there was nothing for vegetarians or vegans to eat at Thanksgiving, so that was the whole thing behind Tofurkey. The first products were all Thanksgiving Tofurkey products, and then we branched out into deli slices and sausage.
So my own current book, how's it going? I'm trying to get to know my characters better. So I have a file called Characters Talking, with each of the characters telling me their life stories. And out of that, I have really gotten some interesting things that kind of went beyond the initial outlining I had done. I found it kind of a good compromise between what they call pantsing, just kind of going by the seat of your pants and writing without planning, and plotting, which is kind of what I tend to do just because I love spreadsheets and planning. Finally got to my character, my protagonist, and she's telling me her life story. But the other struggle I was having with my book, I feel like it has too many things going on, too many plots, too many storylines. So I'm trying to really condense 3 main things happening into 3 acts, the 3-act structure. The other thing I'm trying to decide if I'm going to write in first person or third person omniscient. I've read a lot of warnings about not writing, especially your first book, third person omniscient. I guess it's very difficult to do. You're sort of of like all-knowing and you can get into the characters' minds. We'll see. Do you have a preference in what you write or read? First person, third person? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for tuning in, and I look forward to sharing the next book with you next week. If there's any books you recommend, please do also let me know in the comments, and I'll check them out.